is one of the Republicans who voted to oust McCarthy, Congressman Bob Good of Virginia. Thanks for taking the time, Congressman. You have made it very clear that you aren't a fan of Kevin McCarthy. You voted against him really from day one. So who do you think should replace him?
Well, you've had some folks' faces on the screen just a moment ago. I think there's a few different candidates who I think would be strongly qualified, have the right kind of qualities that we need in a leader. And frankly, this is a win for the American people. If you don't agree with the Biden, Pelosi, Schumer policies under which the American people are suffering and for which they elected a House majority to fight those policies, if you're concerned about $33 trillion national debt, $2 trillion deficit this year, a weaponized federal government against its citizens, an open border, then you want a true fighter for the policies that the Republicans claim that they stand for. And while most members of Congress are risk averse and kind of put self-ambition and self-preservation at the forefront, it takes courage to fight for true change. And you saw that on display yesterday. You saw that on display back in January. But frankly, we held accountable the Speaker. The American people didn't give the House majority to Republicans for us to cave, as we did on this past Saturday with the continuing resolution that was voted 209-1 by Democrats in the House and 51-0 by Democrats in the Senate. That's not why we got the House majority. Okay, so a lot I want to follow up on, but going back to my original question, who do you think it should be? You said there are a lot of people that you see in the faces that we put up. Name names. Who do you want to be Speaker? And what are the specific or ideal qualities you think the next Speaker should have? Well, I appreciate for entertainment purposes you'd like me to name someone, but I'm not going to disclose my hand. I'm not going to show my hand. There are several who I think would be good. We will be vetting those candidates, meeting with those candidates, asking them questions, asking about what they'll do differently, what their commitments will be, and we'll be doing that together as a body. It won't be, and no one of us can pick a speaker. You know, a handful of us, as we know, can block things in a narrow majority. But the good news is we will own together. Whoever emerges as Speaker after Tuesday's candidate forum, as we vote that person in, perhaps as early as Wednesday, because they will have to get 218 votes. Right. And we will have a vested interest in their success because the country needs them to be successful. But all of us members will have to come together, at least 218 out of 221, for that person to advance as Speaker. Well, you were one of the handful of Republicans who voted with Democrats. You were the outsider within your own party making this vote to oust Speaker McCarthy. What makes you think changing just one person at the top will change the dynamics in Washington? Democrats control the Senate and the White House. Why do you think losing this one guy will give you what you want? Well, the Speaker has tremendous power in the House, and we realize the Republicans aren't going to get everything they want in divided government, but we can get something. We can fight for something besides becoming Speaker. And, you know, what we can't surrender and get rolled like we did in the failed Responsibility Act, where we passed an unlimited increase of the debt ceiling, where one of our negotiators, frankly, went into the negotiations with the president, basically associating himself with the president's position of not having spending cuts connected to the debt ceiling increase. Well, how in the world were we going to negotiate or leverage for spending cuts if that was our position? Of course, we didn't do that. We didn't have any significant spending reforms or significant spending cuts. We had an unlimited increase to the debt ceiling that Democrats gladly voted for 4-1 in the House and voted for overwhelmingly in the Senate. That was a surrender. I hear what you're saying about continuing resolution was a surrender. We can't have a Speaker who surrenders. We need a Speaker that fights and negotiates and uses the leverage that we have as the House majority. I hear what you're saying and how important it is to rein in spending in your mind. But if there's no Speaker and no votes, it's not in my mind. We've got $33 trillion national debt. I hear you. I hear you. May I ask the question? I hear you. We've got a $2 trillion deficit. It's not in anybody's mind. It is factual reality. And I've let you talk about that specifically for a while here. But right now, we're in this state of play where there's no Speaker and no votes for at least a week. How does anything get done? You also have a government shutdown coming up. What do you think the American people are concerned about that Congress isn't going to do to them in the next week or two? What did you think was going to happen in the next week or two that the American people are going to say, you know what, the House majority, it's been doing all these courageous, tough things, and now they're not going to do it for a week or two. They're not going to send bills over to the Senate. The Senate's not going to pass, and the president's not going to sign. And so, gosh, we just got to keep the status quo going, the status quo that's failing the American people. We got to keep the open border policies, the reckless spending, the weaponization against the government, against against its citizens. We got to keep that going. We can't disrupt it for a week or two because Congress is doing such a great job.
Well, you know that things don't move quickly in Washington. Just the logistics of getting through a bill that would avoid another government shutdown could take some time. And the shutdown deadline at this point is November 17th. That's in a matter of weeks. You are still in the majority party, but with no votes and no speaker right now. How do you respond to those who question whether this is responsible governing?
Well, I agree with you to a point. We should have passed our spending bills. As Speaker McCarthy committed, we would pass 12 or at least bring them to the floor for a vote well before the September 30 deadline. That was a reflection of the failures of the past and a continuation of that. And that's one of the reasons why he is no longer Speaker. So we should have done that. We should have broken the cycle. We should have broken the trend, and we should have done that. We should have sent the Senate the most conservative bills that we could send with 218 votes. We didn't do that.
But the most conservative bills in the Senate would not get through a Senate that is majority Democrat and a White House that has a Democratic president.
We're going to have a new speaker.
Okay, and I just wanted to make that point. You're saying you could get through the most conservative bills possible with a House majority Republicans, but that's not going to get anything done for the American people when you have divided government, when you have Democrats in the majority in the Senate and a Democratic president. So it's not like Republicans have a mandate in Washington right now.
Well, the greatest reflection of the American people is the House. It's not the Senate, which only has a third of their members up every 2 years and is not proportional by population. It's not the White House, which is every 4 years since the Electoral College. It's the House that's the direct reflection of where the people are from a population standpoint. The most recent federal election we had, Republicans were given the House majority for a reason, and that was to reverse the Biden, Pelosi, Schumer policies that are in place right now. But you're right. The Senate has passed no bills, zero. The House has at least passed 4 bills. Both sides should have passed all 12, and we should be in a conference committee negotiating with some give and take. And yes, it's going to be tough
give and
rough
take,
and tumble,
keywords
but
there.
it shouldn't be a cave by Republicans once again to just do what the Democrats want to do, and that's what the continuing resolution was. And that's the track we were on, where you'd have another CR. We wouldn't have passed our bills this month, and then we'd have an omnibus in December, which would further exacerbate the problems that are destroying the country.
We'll see what happens next week. Republican Congressman Bob Good of Virginia, I appreciate your thoughts. Thanks for sharing your perspective with us.